audience in here, and I'll make you co-hosts too, no, just so you can let people in. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to have you here yet again this week. Hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. That was a fun one. Um, I did some great stuff on that Labor Day. Had a wedding to go to, did some mini golfing at the local arboretum. It was a blast. Um, School year's kicking in. Great season for piano technicians here, where we start getting some more business tuning pianos, getting things ready for the season. So that's great stuff. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. If you're just kind of joining us for the first time, maybe you're on YouTube or Facebook for catching this live. Stick around. We'll start to introduce the program, introduce our guest for the day, and we'll have a little bit of fun for about an hour because it is called Piano Tech Radio Hour. And then you can be on your way and have something to think about. That's worth thinking about. So I'll welcome you to the program, let you know what's going on here. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. What we do is we gather every Saturday, wow, for like 4 years now, to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. This includes, manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, piano techs, and then of course we expand well beyond the piano world as well into music and the arts. Our mutual goal here is to become better at our crafts, help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. That's an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, this program, for just $16 a month. You get direct access to each week's private Zoom call and archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. And you can join PTRH using the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget, we have a podcast, so we take some of these video recordings, or basically all of these video recordings, and release them as audio-only podcast episodes at some point or another. We'll bring in some things from the archives from about 2 years ago, bring in some newer stuff that was more recently recorded, and it's fun for everyone. And we've been top rated, even #1 in some countries in the performing arts category on iTunes. So it's a pleasure to listen to while you're driving around, working out, doing the dishes, doing some shop work. Also check out our blog, which will give you technical information for free that is behind our paywall normally. And we'll talk about things like voicings, regulation, all that stuff, give you a sneak peek into our member area content. And if you like what you see, you can get in there more. That's on Substack, pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com. And then, of course, just visit our socials, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and to find out more about us and what's going on. And you just Google it and you'll figure out what to do next. All right, now let's introduce our guest for the day. His name is Scott Flavin. Am I pronouncing it appropriately? Flavin?
Flavin.
Flavin. Of course I said it wrong. Much more flavorful when you say
There
Flavin.
you go. I have my flavor. I need my watch around there.
Scott Flavin, a versatile and flavorful conductor, violinist, composer, and I'm sorry, you probably got that way too much, but
all through high
professor
school, man. All through high school.
at the Froth School of Music, a professor there. Scott has led performances all over the globe, sharing the stage with legends like Luciano Pavarotti, Lena Horne, Itzhak Perlman, and he's even contributed to Grammy-winning albums. We'll hear about some more celebrity musicians he's worked with as well today. His compositions have been performed internationally, showcasing his wide-ranging talents with deep experience in both the classical and jazz worlds. Scott has mastered the art of blending these genres, making him a highly sought-after artist and a dedicated mentor to the next generation of musicians. Scott, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you so much. What a great intro. Jeez, this is wonderful. Just need
You
a drum
did it.
roll and we all
You
set.
did it all.
Well, it's such a great honor to be here. It really is.
Awesome.
I'm excited about what you guys are doing.
I've hosted several podcasts at this point and probably now recorded hundreds and hundreds of episodes of various things. And so I feel like I've gotten pretty good at bios. People usually feel very nice about themselves
Yes,
after I read them.
that's right. I had a
Oh, that's neat.
conductor that I worked with years ago. He had in his contract, no musician could talk to him outside of rehearsal. So you're going to make
Mm,
my head that big. It'll be like, don't talk to me.
got better things to think about than what you have to say. Okay, let's roll it back here a little bit to the early years. How did your whole musical journey get started?
Well, both my parents were musicians. My dad was a Wagnerian tenor, a Helden tenor, and my mother was a very fine cellist. And I grew up in Boston, and I was the second child. And they made my brother, my older brother, take all sorts of instrument lessons, which he hated. In fact, piano technicians, my brother took a screwdriver to the keys of the piano and ripped off the ivories in, I think, in
Oh,
rage. I don't know what it was. Too many charity exercises. I don't know what it was.
mm.
So when I
That's
came
like that
along, they
fingernail torture that they do, but it's for the
yes,
piano.
but to this beautiful old piano. And so they sort of ignored me. And at 5 years old, I had a lot of exposure. So I was at the Boston Symphony hearing Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and I saw those guys sitting in the front with these little wooden boxes with a stick, playing the violin, and I thought that's what I want to do. And I knew at 5 that I wanted to be a violinist, and so my path has been music ever since then.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, my partner, she made our son a little paper mache kind of ish violin when he was like 2 or 3 or something, like just when he was really little, but did like a really good job making it. He plays the cello now,
Uh,
but just remember that moment of kind of giving him that little, remind me what you said, that box with the stick and all that stuff.
well, there's something
Did you?
about the choreography, the physical aspect of it, and I have to
Mhm.
tell you, making that acoustic sound is still very, very thrilling to me. And I would
Did you do
say just
Suzuki? What kind
I
of training
didn't.
did you do?
No, no. I had a teacher. I had a teacher who played in the Boston Ballet, was not a
Mhm.
famous teacher, didn't have a huge roster of students, but I loved the violin. And so my lessons would, even as a young kid, sometimes would go 2, 3, 4, 5 hours long. And in
Mm.
fact, my mother told me that in one lesson I fell asleep at the violin, but she was incredibly devoted. So if I play the violin well at all, it's because of Shirley Boyle back in the 1970s, who was such a devoted teacher, uh, gave me everything as far as that goes.
That's awesome. Shout out to Shirley.
Yeah.
Um, it's alliterative as well. Um, and then, so you got really serious about it. You love the instrument. Uh, how did this actually come to a career? Were you like thinking about going to, be an engineer or something, or was this kind of like a central passion of yours,
It was a central
directional
passion
thing?
for me. There was no doubt whatsoever. And in fact, I write for Strings Magazine, which is in the violin world, in the string world, it's sort of the central publication in this country. And I wrote an article about unconditional support from parents, which I had. I mean, my parents were always supportive. My mother, believed in me. Just a few years ago, I got a call from my former French teacher in high school who said, your mother, met with me your senior year. And she was really concerned about you making a career in music. She thought, it's hard to do this. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. I'm really worried. None of which my mother ever told me. Her face was only of support and care and belief.
Hmm.
And, it's really remarkable. If she had expressed those doubts to me, I might have wavered a bit, but she never did.
Yeah, yeah. That is
It's an
so
act of love.
important.
Yeah.
That is so important. I think especially because there's this magical thing that happens, when you're either youthful or new to a domain where you actually have no idea how hard it could be, right?
Yes.
And that actually is helpful because, things might actually like just roll out and come easy for you if you weren't trained to think that they're going to be difficult, or problematic.
It's really amazing how that works. I love that viewpoint. It's so very, very true. And I look at it now when I'm teaching my students, and I've been playing the violin for 50 years now, 51 years,
Oh,
over half a century. So I know how to do it fairly well, and I see my students who come in and work very hard and are excellent, but they don't quite know some of the secrets to keep growing. And
mm,
that's exciting to share with them. So I
mm.
love teaching too.
So you're accomplished conductor here as well. How did that come about, that you got into that domain? Clearly it's a lot different than starting on the violin,
Right. Well,
different
I was
direction.
in a youth orchestra, and the conductor asked me to conduct a piece of Beethoven to check balances so he could listen out in the house. And it went well, and I felt really great about it. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's something I really would like to do. And also, as a violinist, one aspires to be concertmaster, to lead the string section, which is something I always did as well.
Hmm.
And the two sort of go in hand in hand. Those the ideals of leadership, good leadership, which is the give and take, the having the conviction to lead, but then also to be a part of your team and to be warm and engaging, or try to be at least. That's all very, very exciting to me. So that started me conducting and doing creating opportunities for myself as a conductor always. And then for the past almost 20 years, I've been the conductor for the Henry Mancini Institute Orchestra, which has been a real boost for me. And then this past year was named resident conductor of the Symphony of the Americas in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is a wonderful orchestra. So I'm conducting a few concerts with them, and hopefully more as time goes on, and teaching a lot of conducting as well with my dear colleague Gerard Schwartz, a wonderful conductor, and teaching conducting is also a really exciting field. But yeah, in general, I just absolutely adore conducting. I adore that combination of skills you have to have: deep musical sense, deep knowledge and study, the technique of conducting, showing shape and emotion and meaning with gesture, and then dealing with people, dealing with musicians in a positive way, dealing with the audiences, dealing with boards and fundraising and trying to generate interest. All of those skills coming together, I think, are very, very exciting to me.
Mm. Can you tell me more about the Symphony of the Americas in terms of, okay, there's the Americas, right? There's North America, there's South America. There you are in Miami.
Mm.
Before this program, we were joking around a little bit about you can't take an Uber unless you speak Spanish because it's so much Latin American culture there.
Yeah.
Is that a part of the Symphony of the Americas, or is that just kind of the name, or
It
how does it work?
it it is becoming more and more a part of this orchestra. Our music director has been on board for I think 4 years now, Pablo Mielgo from Spain,
Mhm.
and he is committed, as am I, to establishing connections amongst the Americas. So we have some ideas in place to sort of get representatives from all the Latin American countries as well as Canada together, and in the name of creating great music and thinking of a hemispheric kind of perspective of music making and communication. We live in difficult times. We in the music field, we all know how important music is in terms of how we interact. In fact, I'm working on a book on that very topic of what the world can learn from musicians and how we solve problems together and come to some kind of agreements.
Hmm. Yeah,
So yeah,
I
so we have
should
a couple of plans in the orchestra of doing just that.
I should introduce you to one of our other guests, who I really enjoyed. His name is Christian Benitez. Have you heard of Christian Benitez?
No, no.
He's a relatively young pianist, and he's
Ah,
recently won a Grammy for his playing, and yeah, and he's very much concerned with the music of Venezuela, his home country, and
excellent.
kind of bringing that to the fore and doing a great job of it. So
Phenomenal. Oh, I'll have to look them up and get in touch.
definitely.
For violin, there's Venezuela is it. The El Sistema. I mean, the number of great musicians coming out of Venezuela, phenomenal. But yeah,
Um,
so in conducting this repertoire, we do a lot of Latin inspired music, and then I'm doing music sort of coming from the United States, at least this season, Copland and Bernstein and Mancini, and writing some music myself for the orchestra.
yes. Yeah, Mancini is such an icon of American music history. I'd love to talk more about that. At the same time, I want to maybe give people a musical example. We picked a piece that from people can find on YouTube, and maybe we thought we'd listen to a little bit. Is that cool if I bring that up?
Absolutely.
Okay. You want to give us a little context on
Sure.
that?
This is a composer, Busseret, who is really unknown, from Belgium. And one of my former colleagues uh, donated his entire music library and knew these composers. And this is around 1910. And it's never been recorded before. So this is the first performance. And the pianist in this recording is our head of accompanying at the Frost School of Music, Alexei Ivanchenko, a wonderful, wonderful pianist, a collaborative pianist. So
Okay.
I shouldn't say accompanying, I should say collaborative piano.
Yeah.
It's coming up.
Um,
We have a little
yeah, for
advertising
sure.
there. Here we go.
Sure, you got the details.
We
Should I
have
click
there's
further
a
or should
nice
we just?
Hamburg Steinway at the Frost School in our concert hall, and wonderful instrument.
Beautiful.
And that's
That's a
me
good
with hair.
moment. Very nice.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing that with us. Yeah,
Thanks.
beautiful, beautiful.
It's
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, you're making me just think about intonation. I mean, it sounds great. Of course, you're a professional violinist. You have great intonation. My son plays the cello, and I'm working on, I forget what it's called, whatever, lightly row or whatever. He's playing. I got a big
He's
cello.
doing Suzuki.
He's doing the Suzuki, yeah, and yeah, whatever. I'm just trying to put. I'm like, I know music. I can play because I don't know if you know. I'm a pianist. I play jazz. I study jazz, all this stuff. But man, just getting the bow and the intonation and all that stuff at the same time
It's a long journey. It's a long game.
it's a long
But
journey.
one thing that one of the reasons I'm so excited to be gabbing away for your audience or with your audience is I'm I've having a sort of a rebirth of love for the piano. I grew up listening to great pianists and hearing sounds that were readily identifiable. Hearing one phrase of these pianists and you know who it was. I mean,
Mm,
Rubinstein and Horowitz and Rudolf Serkin. Um, Russell Sherman in Boston was a wonderful. David DeVoe, Claudio Arrau. Those pianists that you hear a few notes and you know who it is.
mhm.
There's this silly kind of sort of joke that goes around that the piano's easy because you can start out and you make a great sound, and the oboe's hard to make any kind of sound, and the French horn's impossible, and the violin's difficult because you're squeaking away, and it downplays what makes a great pianist great. And as I've been thinking about, that issue and becoming more and more excited about it when I hear pianists and when I hear great pianists, and when I'm fortunate enough to play with them and to conduct them. And I've found some truths that I think are. I mean, there's different proportions of them, but one obviously is tone. And I know in a lot of jazz pianists that isn't necessarily an issue. It's less of an issue, but I think that oversimplifies it because what is the tone supposed to mean?
Mm,
So that's one big one, and then another one for me is the voicing of chords, the voice leading,
mm.
humongous. I mean, and I hear that as I get older and I'm listening for it more. I hear it ever more clearly, and that to me translates to how pianos are voiced too, the other kind of voicing. And then the third to me is what the French call le bon goût, the sense of style and good taste. And what does that mean? And again, I think there are so many pianists today that are able to do that. But there's always, to me, a mix of, a couple of those issues in great pianists. And yeah, I found just a renewed vigor in, working with pianists and listening to great pianists and appreciating what's been what kinds of things come out.
Yeah. I mean, with jazz specifically, there's that sort of intangible. which is kind of a nice aspect of jazz, is the feel, the swing, right?
Oh, it's
Oh
the
man,
groove.
that cat
Yeah,
really swings. You have a lot of liberty to uh, play with the rhythms and are you playing behind the beat? Are you playing ahead of the beat? Do you have a more of a straight kind of lilt to it, or is it very like, you know, uh, skipping? I'm using sort of terrible vocabulary there, but but yeah, as a jazz musician and as a jazz pianist, I think that also is a signature that
signature.
you can introduce that says who you are, right? That says your style.
Exactly. I was thinking about, I've done a lot of concerts with Dave Grusin, wonderful pianist. And I was just listening to the other day to The Firm. I don't know if you know that soundtrack, but it was, I believe, I mean, it was Grammy or Academy Award nominated, but I think it was one of the first soundtracks with just piano. I mean, it's primarily just him. There's a couple
Mm.
of rhythm section things, but it's mainly just him. And thinking back on Dave, and privileged to have spent a good amount of time with him. I mean, one of the greatest thrills of my life was walking down the hallway and somebody yelled out, "Scott, hey, how are you?" And I turned out it's Dave Bruce, and oh my gosh.
Mm.
Um, but there's always an identifiable sound, and it's also in terms of the way he voices chords in general. To me, that on any piano in any size room, it's like, oh yeah, this is Dave Bruce, and there's nobody else should sound like that. It's remarkable, and it's an outpouring of who he is, and there's such a range with him. As an example.
Mm.
And
T-
another one for me is Chick Corea. I mean, I conducted him with my orchestra in Miami, and showed up for the dress rehearsal with Chick, who's a nice guy from New England like me. So, and we start out, everything's going great, he's grooving and everything, and then he takes a solo, and I'm standing there on the podium in front of him, and literally my jaw dropped. It was stunning. I felt like I was in the presence of Miles or Monk or Mozart, and that Chick was there just opening up his skull and allowing us all to be he, understand what his was in his brain. It was this combination of incredible complexity and yet absolute clarity,
mhm. Mhm.
immediate clarity. It's such an incredible experience because uh, his complex. It was so complex, but it made so much sense. It's incredible.
That's really cool. Now, in terms of your experience with jazz, are you um, are you primarily doing conducting, with jazz soloists? Are you playing jazz, or what's your scope with jazz?
Yeah, well, primarily conducting it, but then I've also spent a lot of time in the studio and working with wonderful, wonderful players in many different genres. And the thing
Mhm.
I've loved about that is, you get in the studio and you have a 3 hour session or 2 3 hour sessions or a week of sessions. And you're working with these top people. And admittedly, I was getting in, coming into the studio with a paltry knowledge of jazz,
Mhm.
but you get exposed to these guys, cats, who have this clarity, this sense of groove, this inexorable kind of pulling you along. And if you're a decent musician and you're responsive and you're able to be flexible, you start to embrace that different sound world and that different approach, and which I think I did fairly well. And so a lot of it's come out of the recording studio for me.
Hmm. And where do you typically, are you recording there in Miami? Or are you going to like
Yeah,
Los
it's
Angeles or New
sort of
York or?
slowed down a bit, but mostly in Miami. There's the Hit Factory in Miami. It's a big one. It used to be Criteria. Studio A is where James Brown recorded, and the Bee Gees, of course, and did stuff with Michael Jackson, Shakira, all sorts of performers of many different genres, and a good amount of work.
And then is there, again, to go back to that question that I kind of had with the the Symphony of the Americas, is there like Latin jazz stuff going on pretty heavily? Are you
Oh yeah.
involved with that, or is that
Yes, we have
yeah?
so many colleagues. Daphnis Prieto, I don't know if you know Daphnis, wonderful. Martin Bejarano, I
Mhm.
just participated in an album where he's done wonderful remixes of Prince. Phenomenal and great
Wow.
charts. And he's just a really amazing keyboard player. Phenomenal,
So you got to
phenomenal.
conduct an orchestra
I actually was
doing
playing in that
Prince?
one. Yeah,
You were
yeah,
playing. Oh, very
yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's a
That
blast.
must have been fun.
Absolute blast. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So
let's
there's sort of
talk.
this melting pot of styles down in Miami.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about um, conducting, as a, how you do it, what's involved, all of these things. So we just for clarity here, we've had a series of guests just happen to say it's been connecting with a lot of conductors lately. Um, Interesting, like a few of them are kind of like yourself, where they kind of fell into it. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be a conductor. They just started doing it, and it kind of picked up, and they started getting into it. Um, but everything from, someone who's written a book. We had this woman, Beyond the Baton. She wrote this book, and it's
Yes, sure, I
actually
know.
relatively popular and well read. And but to also just people who are doing music direction and it turns to conducting, and they get kind of hired on gigs to work with, this one woman was working with really cool project with Esperanza Spalding and the saxophonist who played with Miles and Coltrane. I can't think of his name right now for some reason. Anyways, um, really cool. Just like a variety of things. So, how do you think about um, conducting on the podium? Like, and then also compared it with like all the other stuff that's going on. Yeah.
Compared with the other stuff that's going on in terms of,
In terms of rehearsals and like you were talking about whatever fundraising and whatever boards and all
yeah,
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm privileged to be teaching conducting in two pretty significant programs, both along with Gerard Schwartz, world famous conductor. One is at the Frost School, where we have four advanced conducting their TAs, and the history of that program already in 6 7 years is just phenomenal. Job placement and professional affiliations, and one of our early graduates became the assistant to Dudamel in LA. And we have another one that just got assistant in North Carolina. We have a current student who is in Japan right now, working with Ricardo Muti. So these are the young superstars of tomorrow in terms of the
Mhm.
conducting world. So that's one place. And then in the summers, Eastern Music Festival in Greensboro, North Carolina, which also has a significant conducting program. And 11 or 12, a dozen or so young conductors, all from the top programs in the country. The reason they come, besides studying with us, is there's a lot of podium time.
Mhm.
You can sit and analyze scores and talk about music at the deepest level, which you must do as a conductor. But it is incredibly important that you stand up in front of an orchestra as much as possible. And I used to think that, hey, learn your scores, learn what you're going to do, listen, go to a bunch of rehearsals, and then we'll do a workshop with piano and conduct the piano. That'll start to get you there. So you learn the
Mhm.
basics. Yeah, but it really doesn't. You need winds, you need strings, you need timpani, you need to know how to interact with all these different groups. And that takes time. So in both these programs, it's about uh, at Frost, it's 4 hours a week of podium time for the four conducting TAs, 1 hour each. It's huge. And then at Eastern, it's 6 hours a week, and so that makes the difference. Because again, you can sit there and yada 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 talk about how to do things, but you've got to get the students in the conductor seat.
Mm.
That
And
alchemy that happens is really an incredible thing, and especially if you're talking about piano, that to me is it's a very different kind of interaction if you're conducting a concerto soloist, I think, than a lot of other instruments or voice even.
I have a question, and tell me if it's naive and we could skip it. But um, I was having a conversation. There's a recording we might air later. It hasn't aired yet with another conductor, but it it reminded me of piano technicians world in that the conducting world is a long and storied history and an educational history, and there's like an educational tradition, it's like, you're supposed to learn how to like play the piano, score, with all these different parts and all that stuff. And like you said, maybe you start with piano based things or something. And although that's useful, there's also some like traditional elements of how the way people learn that sometimes you start thinking like, do we really need to do this? Like a piano, be a piano tuner. Do I need to tune with a tuning fork? Probably not. If I can get an
Wow,
app
just leave it, huh?
and play the, yeah, just get the app and play the A440, right? Have you seen anything interesting in terms of the way the approach to education for conductors has changed or hasn't changed, how you'd like to see it change to sort of provide a better route to how it happens?
That's a great question. I love this, and I want to hear more about tuners, man, because that's our technicians. Because I love that. I love talking about tuning. But yeah. So long, the ideal was the European ideal, which is what you talked about. You're a conducting student. Everybody plays the piano. You play for each other. You pull apart scores, and I think of von Karajan and Furtwängler and those old German guys sat around, and that's what you did. You started with the piano, and it started with a huge knowledge of solfege and rhythmic practice and ear training at the highest level. And I mean, the ear training I think is still very important in rhythmic training as well. But there's some shortcuts that I think have gotten us to a better place too. It was rather stuck, I think, in a certain sense.
Mm.
That said, I was in Macedonia this summer, at the end of the summer, conducting, and it still is Europe is still a very different feel,
Hmm.
and they view Americans differently. We are different people, and so it's a different system. But let's see, in terms of teaching, yeah, I mean, we have some students who really don't play the piano well.
Hmm.
We have some students who do not have a huge theory background. Obviously, you're going to need some of those skills. Like, I'm a terrible pianist, but I'm able to pull apart a score and think about it. And, obviously you have to deal with transpositions and you have to have some kind of understanding of all the instruments of the orchestra. Those are sort of a minimum. So again, working real time with an ensemble can get you there, I think, faster, and I think more comprehensively. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I feel like that's a little bit more direct route to being comfortable leading an orchestra and interacting with an orchestra.
We just mentioned pianos. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Mm.
What's your piano life like? I mean, you said you're not the most amazing pianist, so I'm sure you play pretty well, to be honest.
No, 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 I really don't.
But you
But
you have you have some acoustic pianos in your life now or in the past?
yes, I
What
have
do
in my studio a wonderful Boston that I like very much. I love the low end of that piano, especially. I was
Mhm.
telling you earlier, I had a beautiful Hamburg, like a 1910 Hamburg that in Miami, it's just every week. Our wonderful technician Paul Bruno, who's a wonderful piano tech, he was coming every week to work on this thing. And at one point, he said, it's just going to keep happening. The pin, needed a new block. Hammering the pins in, and it still didn't hold. And then the hammers were starting to go. And then at home, a Yamaha
Okay, wait,
that
let's this
yeah,
this could
sorry.
be interesting. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah,
We'll see.
yeah,
What happened to it? Like, did you like sell it? Was there some value to it? Did you think about rebuilding it? Because the Hamburg
yeah,
Steinway, like that could be,
yeah.
you know, you could
It
you
was a
could get
school.
as much out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a school piano. It was a school piano
Okay.
at
Okay,
the
got it.
Frost School,
Okay.
and yeah, I can't remember what happened to it. I think it's probably in the workshop,
Okay.
but wasn't necessarily worth a rebuild. But
Hmm.
there's something about the singing sound of that piano. 1910, boy, it was as a violinist, it sang, which is so beautiful. And I get allergic to a lot of the pianos that I hear today that don't have that quality. And I understand we're listening for maybe different things than we did. I grew up in Boston, in New England Conservatory. I don't know if you roamed those halls at all. It used to be
Okay.
Chickerings and Mason and Hamlins and these Knabas and old Becksteins and beaten up. But you know what? They all had this kind of timeless, different kind of sound that
Hmm.
mm, just so beautiful. A lot woodsier, a lot more wood in there. And I don't know what exactly, but I love that sound. And
Yeah,
then the
Boston
piano.
is the key locale for piano and piano technology. I don't know how much you're aware of it. Of course, you have the Boston piano, but the there's a famous school for piano technicians. They're called North Bennett Street School. That's like the oldest, you know, uh, crafts person school in the nation, I suppose. But so therefore, there's a lot of, interesting things coming out of the piano world historically and currently from that area.
I have a question for you. I date back to the Boston days when there was the Falcone pianos. I don't know if you heard of those.
I've heard of it, don't know much about it.
They
Is your
were
question about
handmade
it?
pianos in Boston and exceptional. I mean, everyone I heard had this creaminess to them. I mean, just really phenomenal European kind of sound. And I don't know, in the 80s, they were in business. I think they probably went out of business in the late 80s or the early 90s. And exceptional instruments, at least from my perspective at that time. And they exist no more. It's sort of sad.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to have a piano company these days.
Right? It's a nice investment, right? And then at home, a Yamaha that I bought out of the box, which hadn't been voiced at all. And our dear friend Paul Bruno, our technician, came, and after many, many hours and many thousands of dollars, it also sings. But he was doing, steaming the hammers, and he was adverse to needling, and
Hmm.
that softened it up enough to the point where it wasn't mushy, but it had a lyrical kind of quality that I thought was really exceptional. I mean, the sturdiness of those instruments is just remarkable. But boy, it was like it was pingy beyond belief, metallic and bright,
Hmm.
and got it to a place where it has more roundness and quality to the sound.
Yeah, Yamaha's been improving, year after year after year in terms of its reputation and the quality and the craftsmanship over the years,
We
the
just built a
design.
recital hall at the Frost School, and we have, our dean is Shelley Berg, who you may know, wonderful jazz pianist, and he's very big on the piano, obviously. And we got is it Spirio, the new Steinways?
Hmm.
Yeah, we have two of those. One
Wow.
in the concert hall, and then one in the smaller black box theater in this new recital hall. Wonderful. I mean, really, really great. Exceptional. He's someone I like to talk about too because um, he's a phenomenal jazz pianist. He does amazing things, but he also has just this beautiful tone. And I went up to him after rehearsal. I said, Shelley, it's just no matter what, I want to listen to your sound all day long. Where does this come from? And he
Mhm.
said, growing up in Texas, Russian teacher. He said, classic Russian teacher hitting you with the ruler and doing all the Hanon and everything, but insisting upon beauty of tone. So
Yeah.
you hear a guy, really grooving and, giving the guts of his soul out of pulling the guts of the soul out of the piano. And yet there's always this gorgeous quality of sound that, again, as a melodic instrument centered person, I get seduced by that. I feel the importance of that.
That's great.
Mm.
Yeah, it's cool to talk about the tone of a piano player. We actually don't talk about that. We talk about the tone of the instrument, but the tone of the piano
Right.
players, I'm glad you've brought it into the conversation today.
Mm.
Um, I want to also talk about just sort of music appreciation, classical music appreciation, maybe even jazz and orchestral, whether you call it classical, orchestral or not. It seems like that's one of the roles that tends to come upon a conductor, right? You're curating sometimes the sequencing and the choices of the program and all of these things. And how do you think about like it's 2024 exposing people to music, how they should approach it themselves, how you kind of approach introducing people and curating these things?
Well, I've been around long enough. I've heard, for about 40 years, maybe 45 years, I've heard the statement that classical music is dying out. The audience is getting older, it's getting more exclusive. Nobody's going to orchestral concerts anymore. It's a failure on our part. And I've heard that for almost half a century. And if the audience kept getting older for half a century, they'd have to be 180 years old. So I don't believe that's true. I believe a couple of things. I believe that the audience for a lot of concert orchestral music is going to be older. They're going to have a higher, disposable income. They're going to have a degree of maturity and maybe life experience that lends itself to a different pace. Um, so I think it's always going to be an older audience. Should we be content with that and say that's what it is? No, no, we should be reaching out. Believe me, I get so excited by my students get so excited by music, and they want to have the concert halls filled with people their age.
Mhm.
And uh, I think it's a great time for what we all do, live performance. And I think circumstances of COVID really put that into stark relief. I started doing those candlelight concerts. I don't know if they have those in your area, which are alternative venue concerts lit with many candles. And when I started playing them in the midst of COVID, I was the oldest person there, including in the audience. The audience was people in their 20s and 30s, dressed to the nines, having a little bit to eat, having a cocktail or two, a date night, and loving, absolutely loving the music, whether it was the Beatles or Cole Porter or Beethoven or Vivaldi or Coldplay, loving hearing live performance. And I think that there's a new burst of that, and there's a desire for people to hear live performance. And on the other side of it, again, talking, starting with classical music, pretty much the entire canon of our classical experience has been recorded, at least the old stuff. It's all been recorded a million times. People want as Glenn Gould used to say, the non-two-takedness of live performance. They want that. They want it with the warts and all. They want the acoustic experience, or the experience of hearing those sound waves in a given space and sharing that, communing really. And I feel very optimistic about the future. But you're right. I mean, we have to be programming with a couple of different ideas in mind. And one I think is I want to be about music that says something, music that has a great deal of quality, and new music by different kinds of composers, different genres coming together. I think this is the time to do it. The Duke Ellington, there's two kinds of music, the good kind and the other. And I believe that strongly. I really do.
Right.
So I think it's a great time for music. I don't know if that answers your question, but
That's a lot of good stuff. Got some good quotes in there as well. You made me think of my partner. She found a concert opportunity for us to go to with our son, and this is Chicago. We're in Chicago, right? That's where I am. And so, we got the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and like in the same building, they have several rooms and things besides the normal hall. And they had this sort of side performance where it was a series of young composers that got to work with Jesse Montgomery, who's the composer in residence there, and just hear the music that they had created, or they had all created these compositions, and I was blown away at like the music that these young people were putting together. So you made me think about that, these sort of engagement opportunities where you get to bring in younger people, children's concerts, adolescents doing things with this. There's a Chicago Youth Symphony Orchestra that's really cool as well here.
there's so much opportunity. I was lucky to do a project last year, a year and a half ago, recording an album with one of my dear colleagues, John Diversa, wonderful, phenomenal trumpet player. Um, a An album called All Without Words, and the composer's son is on the autism spectrum and is nonverbal, and only hardly makes a sound. But his father, Justin, found out that you put headphones on, he listens to music all the time, this kid, and occasionally he'd sing a melody or two or a couple of notes. So he recorded, and he built melodies out of his son's few utterances, and then built this entire piece about, for full orchestra and trumpet, jazz, as well as multi-genre, really, pretty much, called All Without Words. And what we've done with it when we performed is we had a special section set aside for kids on the spectrum. So if they made noise, it wasn't a problem. If it was too loud for them, there was a way to lower the volume. And nothing is more exciting to me than to be working on connecting with kids on the spectrum, for example, and just connection in general. And it's just a wonderful program. And that's the album is on, I believe, on YouTube also, or Spotify, everything, All Without Words. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the dynamic of live performance and the what was it? The mistakenness? I
The
forget what you said.
non-two-takedness
The
of live performance.
non-two-takedness
And
of it.
Gould
Right.
was referring to that in the negative, because that's when he was, sort of retreated from live performance. He said, "I hate the non-two-takedness of live performance.
Okay.
I hate the noise of the audience. I hate dealing with the uncomfortable hall. Why? I should be in the studio making my art and polishing it and giving giving out the best of me rather than a mere approximation of it when there's all these uncontrollable variables. So that's
Mm-hmm.
not what I want to give out. I want to give out who I am as a musician.
Yeah.
So I think it's switched a little bit. We sort of want that non-two-takedness, the
I don't
spontaneity.
know. I mean, we need it this day and age, I think. I mean, I may be wrong. We'll see how history unfolds here. But with everything digitized
Yes,
and filtered by, robots and AI and all these things, I mean, they're wonderful tools.
yes,
But things become so polished that they get removed from the beauty of why we've made them in the first place.
exactly.
You can't make a robot that is going to make, Monet without Monet. You got to start
Right.
somewhere.
Oh,
You got to start with the humanity, and you got to start with the sort of the mistakes. I agree with you. I think that is part of the essence of what we crave, and I think sometimes these days we don't even realize that is what we are craving.
we're
You know.
craving. Oh, I had one of the most wonderful experiences last year. I wrote a piece, my first song cycle, but based on Bernard Madoff, the
Mm,
financial criminal,
there you go.
and for piano, baritone, and violin also. And you write on these music programs. I do Sibelius. You write everything out, and it has the MIDI sounds and everything, whatever. Get to the first rehearsal, and I tell you, the wonderful pianist Inessa Gegbrifti, dear colleague, she made my little piece of music into something so exquisite that I couldn't even imagine it sounding so beautiful. And that was her. What she brought to it. It was absolutely humbling. I mean, it was hard not to get incredibly emotional hearing every moment of what she brought, not to mention having a great singer, Kim Josephson, sing. It was a remarkable experience. But that, coming from, oh, nice, clean, meaty sound, and then an artist taking my humble music and lifting it and boosting it into something far better. Remarkable.
Yeah, we're just because I thought of it as we were talking about the live music again. Um, we have a piano tuning business as well in New York, based in New York City. I'm in Chicago, but that is based in New York City. And for the first time, we've been talking about doing it. We're going to bring in our community, and we're going to create an event in a couple of weeks. And so we'll have lots of people both performing and attending. All the you can't imagine the richness of the clientele of a piano tuning business, right? If they're not incredible musicians themselves, they're incredible appreciators of music. Like, you can't really have an acoustic piano in your home if you don't have something in your soul. I mean, maybe it was accidentally left there and you just decided to keep it when you moved in or whatever. But even that, the fact that you decided to keep it, you say, "Oh, let's keep that." Yeah. And so it's really, we started pulling it together and bringing in folks from our community. We're going to do it in a couple of weeks. And so far, I've just been blown away. Like, we're going to have a pianist who's, got 3 Emmy nominations and toured with David Byrne, playing a couple tunes, or we're going to have an artist that's got like a 5-story mansion that she created, an art gallery for her own, paintings and architectural work in Manhattan. And um, being together in those spaces with real people and hearing what happens, like not knowing what's going to happen and hearing what happens and allowing it to be something that's in the moment and immersive and experiential.
Yes.
Um, I feel like this people who are artists and creators tend to maybe gravitate towards creating those experiences a little bit more. Oh, let's have a little salon night. We'll play a little bit and do this. But I think the public in general who are not necessarily creators need access to that as
Yes.
well, right?
And definitely, I mean, the alternative venues and homes and things like that are a great way to do it.
Mm.
I have a sort of this is not to get too negative, but I have a very strong reaction now when people come up to me after concerts and say, "Oh, you're so talented and you look like you're having the time of your life, and that's so wonderful." And yes, that's true. I don't know about the talent part, but enjoying myself, yes. But this is not a hobby. This is not just some gift that came to me to be able to do this. No, it's based upon work.
Mm.
Work, hard work. And I mean, I look at the great, wonderful technicians I've known. Uh, they're working at the highest level, and it's very easy to say, "Oh yeah, come in and make this sound good." Well, what is good? I play fairly often in the Dominican Republic, and we had the Van Cliburn winners a few years ago, and they have a rather old Steinway there, and the technician from Steinway, I can't remember his name, young guy from New York came, and boy, he was working so hard on that one piano. I mean, right up to the concert time, and he took this, 1980, late 1970s concert grand and transformed it. Was remarkable. It was
Mm.
incredible. I think he should have taken a bow. It was artistic work.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we've talked about that a few times on the program, and it's become clear um, that possibility that the the technician is a collaborator in the musical performance, the recording, like whatever it is, without somebody who's good, who cares, you don't have the same quality of output, And I think it sounds like you're aware of that too. It doesn't always get out there to the musicians community
Right.
that that's your collaborator in making music. That's your partner.
They
And if
look at a lot of people look at technicians like they're part of the janitorial staff or the stage crew. And I try to change that around because I think that's just really doesn't show what a great technician does.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to start to transition out on.
Dad
Um,
humor, yes,
sorry
yes,
about
oh, dad
that,
humor.
but what happened? But anyways, before we roll out, is there anything you'd like to leave people with in terms of, where to find out more about what you're doing, or just some general words of advice or wisdom that feel like a good
Oh my gosh, wow. Well,
denouement?
I'd love for you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and yeah, again, I feel very optimistic about where we are. My state, the governor cut all our arts funding in Florida. And so my orchestra lost a large amount of a lot of funding, and so many great arts organizations did. And what have we done? We've turned around and asked for more support. And I think that's exactly what our governor wanted us to do, for better
Mm,
or worse. But it behooves us to connect ever more. And I think things like this, like what you're doing, this is phenomenal. We as an artistic community of musicians and music supporters need to connect more.
yeah, I agree. And this phrase has come to me as well, which is appropriate. In many ways, music is medicine.
Yes.
And yeah, if we get rid of it, right? And it's also a lot like food too. And people don't realize like wait that you need that. You kind of
And they
it's
don't
like
realize that's the problem. They don't realize it's not serious enough to them. We absolutely know how important it is. So we have
yeah,
to somehow share that positivity and that positive mindset. That's why I'm writing the book I'm writing, because I,
yeah.
I really feel strongly that if all the world leaders could understand what we as musicians do and how we collaborate together, we give up some of our own strongly held beliefs for the good of the artistic whole, willingly, to create something positive. We could
Mm-hmm.
change the world.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Try having a Christmas party without Sinatra's Christmas classics on in the background. Try
oh,
opening a restaurant. Try running Starbucks without any sound coming in through the speakers. Yeah.
right.
Try having your friends over for a party in silence.
Absolutely.
Not gonna
Absolutely.
happen. All right. Well, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Scott. I'll walk us out. So we've reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks again to Scott Flavin for
Thank you.
joining us today. And as always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that join us today by signing up for this session individually, make your life more convenient. Just subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, $16 a month, recording of today's session in our member area, automatic registration for each week's news session. Join us here next time. You can sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. Check out the podcast, check out the blog, and all of our social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and the works. And we'll see you guys all next week. Thank you very much, Scott. Thanks for everyone
Thank
who
you.
joined us today live. See you later.